Welcome to Tao Living, the Art of Living podcast with your host, Lou Corletto, where you will be supported to remember that you are the driver and not the vehicle, so that you can walk your life in trust. Welcome back to Tao Living podcast, the Art of Living. So this episode, I want to speak about what's coming up soon, which is spring, the spring equinox. Officially March the 20th. And so this is originally called the vernal equinox. Equinox from the Latin equal parts, night and day. And vernal means fresh or refresh, right? So we're coming out of winter into the rejuvenation. Everything comes back online as well, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, right? And the piece that I want to speak to most specifically is, so in most a lot of people during spring equinox, they're like, oh, okay, it's time for house cleaning, right? So spring cleaning, clean out the stuff because the house has been locked up. There hasn't been fresh air because people have been using heat. The windows haven't been open for most people, to let fresh air in again, the Northern Hemisphere, especially where it's been cold for all the winter months. So beautiful thing to do, no doubt. And I'm going to tag that and come back to it around house cleaning as a metaphor. Yet there's an interesting thing that we stopped doing, but used to do quite a bit. We, meaning people, humanity, which was also taking that time to house clean this house. So that's the crux of what I want to speak to on this podcast, on this episode. And so it's interesting if you look at all kinds of cultures, even in like the Catholic faith, they have something called Lent. And Lent is a 40-day process connected to when Christ went and fasted for 40 days in the desert. And it comes from the Anglo-Saxon word to mean lengthen, which is referring to the days and night, because it's right around the 40 days is around the beginning and ending of spring, connected to Easter in their faith, right? But the point of that is to the aspects of Lent for the Catholic faith is to recreate parts of what Christ did during his fasting. So part of it is to fast, right? And it's to cleanse the body, the mind, and the spirit. And so it doesn't matter the faith or walk of life. Traditions around the world have been using seasons to pay attention to clean, right? To refresh the system. And unfortunately, we've let go of a lot of those traditions across the border as people. Maybe you haven't, but most people have. So I'm bringing this back to our attention. And so this house cleaning, right? So the detox, right? How do we detox this thing? We spend time cleaning the house and getting rid of the dust bunnies and, refreshing everything and putting away the winter clothes and taking out the spring clothes, so to speak. Great. We need to do the same to the bodies. And what I mean by bodies is most people think about the body, the physical body. Yep, that's one aspect. But we have a mental body, emotional body, a spiritual body, right? A psychological body, a chemical body. So we're multifaceted, multidimensional, and they all need attention. And there's different ways to access them, right? So practical ways to, depending on where you're at, if you're new to this process, different cleanses for the body, right? So seek your appropriate healthcare supporter provider for insights and suggestions. I'm talking about topics. You decide what resonates for you, right? So there's ways to clean the body, from nutritional cleanses, juice cleanses, herbal cleanses. Like there's specific companies where you take herbal regimens that'll actually focus on, there used to be a really great company called Blessed Herbs from New Hampshire, Northeast somewhere, but unfortunately during the Pandemic, they went out of business, but they were phenomenal, great quality products, and they had this 21-day process where it cleansed blood, lymph, skin, bowels, respiration. It really focused on each one of the systems. Fantastic cleanse. So I'm sure there's somebody else out there who has processes like that as well. There's things like colonics, right? So cleaning out the bowels, literally washing the bowels out. It's a great process. So how do you clean the lungs? How do you clean the vascular system? How do you clean the respiratory system, the digestive system? So giving it a break, hence the fasting, right? And there's all kinds of fasts: intermittent fast, full on out fasts, and that's proportional to what you choose to do, right? So my own journey, decades ago when I began my first process, I did I think the first one was like 3 days, and when I first did it, it was just like bah. One, because my physical body went through stuff because I was putting a bunch of junk in there. Well, when you go to take it out, it's not necessarily a fun process because you start stirring up sludge, right? Even I felt better before I went on the fast. If you start feeling bad when you're on a fast or when you're on a cleanse, that means you're toxic, right? Ride that process. You got to stir up the sludge to get it out and move it through the system. If you've been doing it frequently or you don't put a whole lot of junk in your system, then the cleansing fasting process is still essential. It's just not as challenging or traumatic, if you will. So then I went from like a 3-day, then a 5-day. And then, so I've consistently added these to my life repertoire. I regularly do cleanses and periodic fasts. The longest one I ever did was 47 days, no solid food. And I mixed it with all kinds of things. So there's times I'll do just water for 5, 6, 7. I think the longest I ever did was 8 to 10 days, just water, nothing else. Again, I'm not telling you what to do by any means. You got to decide what works for you and what's appropriate for your system. Yet there are powerful ways to cleanse the system, right? So sweating, saunas, sweat lodges, whatever you need to do to open up the system and get toxicity out, right? So first, let's talk about the physical body, right? So not taking stuff in, meaning abstinence, right? Except for basics like water is essential. You can go for a while without food. You don't think you can, but you can. And so that gives the body a break. And then taking in substances to start to activate cleansing, right? And then cleansing at the cellular level. So what ways to clear the body? So movement, sweat, however you want to sweat, exercise, sweat lodge, getting some body work, right? There's various things to do to activate the physical body to start getting stuff out of its system. Breath to get stuff out of I'm just going to stay physical for now, out of the lung tissue, so the respiration. So think cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, right? The major systems, what can you do to cleanse, right? The neurological system, getting adjusted, right? Starting to clear out trauma, toxins, and thoughts that are locked into all the bodies, right? So accessing the physical body in various ways. Cold plunges, right? There's all kinds of ways that you can activate the system. So body, mind, spirit, right? Mind, how can we cleanse the mind? Meditation, prayer, breath, silence, right? So spirit, how can we cleanse the spirit, right? And again, each person has its process, but prayer, meditation, breath work for sure, plant medicine, right? Depends on the range of where you want to play, what resonates for you and your personal philosophies or theologies or spiritual path. But there's lots of opportunities to access the mind, body, spirit, right? Being in nature, silence. Like this is a biggie to cleanse the mind, the body, and the spirit. Silence. Yeah. Quiet. Peace. Right. So, um, yeah, and so in a few weeks, I'll actually be working with some shamans from the Amazon basin, doing some plant medicine, and that is for sure a mind, body, spirit cleanse, purification process, no doubt. Um, and so back to the pin that I mentioned for the typical spring cleaning, house cleaning, right? So most people go through this spring cleaning, house cleaning. I like to use the metaphor of like a yard sale. So when people have yard sales, and oftentimes when spring starts, people as they're cleaning, they find stuff like, oh, let's get rid of this stuff, right? Great. So let's do the same thing to the body, right? So in the physical house, you find a bunch of items. You either donate them, you recycle them, or sell them, right? Like there's more options to that, but those are three simple options. You don't need these things any longer, right? They're taking up life energy or space or clutter. You're not using them. Pass them on to someone else through donation. Recycle if they're no longer usable, and or if they are, and you can sell them, right? Cool. That's three ways to move stuff back into the system. Well, let's do the same in the body, right? So, how do we do a yard sale inside, a house cleanse during that process? We'll take inventory. What no longer needs to be in here, right? So, thoughts, right? What doesn't need to stay anymore? Clean those up. How about managing your environment? Part of the spring cleaning, the cleansing, cleaning up your environment, the people that you're associating with, right? Be around better people. Choose not to be around toxic people. Be around enlivening people. That's up to you. Become an enlivened person yourself, right? So you're not being toxic to others. Check into behaviors, attitudes, right? Let's reboot those, because our system does change depending on where, like if you've been um, um, if you're not, you don't do well in winter and you get into hibernation, which there's beautiful parts of hibernation, but as you come back out, right, there's things we need to do in our psychology and our mindset and our spirit, right? So these are all processes that we can actively participate instead of just zombie like walking through the process or not paying attention to it all. Yep. Now back to the cleansing piece. For me, my personal experience, there are processes during length of time in cleanses slash fasts. As I mentioned, the first time I went on one 3 days, it was pretty much a purely physiological cleanse. It started to tap into my mind because by day two, I was like, rah, right? Because I'm breaking habitual patterns like eating on clock hours, right? 3 times a day, and I'm not doing that. I'm not chewing. Like the mind's going, what are you doing? What are you not doing? And so that causes that pattern interrupt. And that's just a mental thing to deal with, right? And then I found that as I went longer, the fast went past the physiology and into the mental body. It started, like the monkey minds were rah, right? They're all getting too much attention now because I am now no longer hiding from the things that I used to distract myself from. You'll be surprised how much you distract yourself from with just the concept of eating. As a cool bonus side note, if you think you don't have enough time in your day, go on a fast. You'll find out how much time you can gain because we spend a lot of time during food preparation and eating, right? Especially if you cook for yourself, going to buy the food. So shopping, bringing it home, putting it away, bringing it back out, prepping it, cooking it, eating it, cleaning the dishes. That requires a fair amount of time. When you stop doing that because you're not taking in food, you end up with a whole lot of time you didn't realize you spent doing that, right? So this side is a really positive benefit for that as well, for time usage. Got lost in train of thought there. So my experience, the longer I went, like I mentioned to you, the longest I ever did was 47 days. When I got into that third week, I then started to transcend. So I left the physical body cleanse and I bypassed all the mental monkey mind. Well, not all, but a whole lot of it. But then I went into what I would call the spiritual cleanse, right? And then I started to get it the first time in my life. I started to understand this concept of when Christ, Jesus, went into the desert for 40 days to fast. Because then I met my demons, right? That's part of the story of the experience. So I went into my desert, right? Meaning the desert, for me, the metaphor, the desert was, I now removed everything that I was, so there's no more food, there's no more coffee, right? The only thing that's going in was some fruit juices or vegetable juices, right? And water. So no eating, no stuff. So it was just me and my own self. So I get to deal with my stuff, right? So the stuff, either busyness, the running and the avoidance, that goes away, and all that gets to come back and go, here I am, and it gets dealt with, right? So meeting the demons in the desert, right? The desert meaning is removing everything away from yourself, and there you are with your own self, right? So that's my experience. The longer I went in cleansing fasts, the deeper into my bodies I got, and the more I got to deal with, right? So not necessarily fun, but essential. So again, just bringing that up, that's my experience, doesn't mean it's yours. Just giving a perspective, right? So there are physiological cleanses, there are mental cleanses, there are spiritual cleanses. How you get there, totally up to you, right? What resonates for you, what do you identify with? Where are you at in your life cycle right now? Any of them, anywhere you start, right? If you just fast for half a day and you've never done it before, good job. The fact that you just have the intention to be aware that, hey, we're shifting seasons, shift the seasons, pay attention, right? Your system's now going to be invited to come online, rejuvenate, pay attention to nature, right? The buds are already coming out. We live in a little higher altitude, and we've already got buds coming out. The buds on the trees, and life is renewing itself, right? So there's a new resurgent of life again. Let's not repeat it. Let's show up new and different. And a great way to do that is cleanse the system, which gives you a new playing field to begin from anew. Thanks for tuning in to Tao Living, the Art of Living podcast. Abundant blessings. Ciao. Thank you for tuning in to the Tao Living podcast, the Art of Living. Now go to loucorletto.com, LOUCORLETO.com, to receive your free training, the operator's manual for your vehicle. See, when you buy a phone, you get a manual. When you buy a car, you get a manual. When you entered your body, no manual. Let me teach you how it's really designed to work. Also, help me help others and share this podcast far and wide. And subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, abundant blessings.